what if I told you that the skinny teenager you're seeing on your screen right now is already taking over the entire NBA, from dropping over 40 points as an 18-year-old against grown men to becoming the first teenager in the history of the league to score 50 or more points, to even playing with Team USA at just 17. The future ahead of Cooper Flagg is starting to look scary. But how was it that someone who should still be in college right now has already become this dominant in the NBA at such a young age? And what does the future actually hold for him? Well, to understand that, we have to go back to the late 2010s in Newport, Maine. Kelly and Ralph Flagg welcomed twin boys, first Ace and then Cooper, who were promptly raised around the game of basketball due to both of their parents being lifelong hoopers, with Kelly even scoring over 1,000 points during her own high school career and playing Division I basketball at the University of Maine.
Probably the second grade, I knew that he was going to be special if he worked and wanted it. He was always competitive and always wanted to win everything he did.
However, Cooper, being the younger of the two, faced a big issue growing up, battling against both his parents as well as his older brother.
He has a twin brother who was always like 40, 50 pounds heavier than him growing up and beat out of him.
Yet, it was these battles which helped Flagg to develop a unique mindset to go along with his athletic blessings.
The key is he's gifted. He's super gifted. He's a basketball prodigy, but he's not afraid, man. He's nasty. Like, he's not afraid to walk into places and go at people nose to nose.
And by the time high school had arrived, Cooper was already shocking former NBA players.
If you say like, yo, if he keep going that in 4 years, 3-4 years, like, come on, bro. Mm-hmm. You get what I'm saying? So I'm very high on his game.
Because after winning a state championship in Maine and then moving to Florida to attend Montverde Academy, Cooper would reclassify from the 2025 class to the 2024 in order to speed up his seemingly inevitable journey to the NBA. And in 2024, Flagg would be truly introduced to the whole world.
He was on the development team, on the select team, we call him. Yep. Yeah, and he played extremely well, man. Yeah.
As Cooper was chosen to represent Team USA on their select squad, a unit designed to help prepare the Maine Olympic team to win gold, and Flagg truly held his own.
LeBron ain't practiced with the Olympic team at 17 years old. Like, he wasn't practicing with the Olympic team at 17 years old. Like, come on, like, what are we doing? So I want everybody to pay attention to what's happening out here.
However, what happened next during his stint at college representing the Duke Blue Devils was even more shocking than his Team USA selection.
I have to remind myself it's a year early. Like, he should be graduating high school now. And so to have the season that he's had, I think the stats speak for itself. I think how hard he plays. I think the highlights. I think all those things speaks for itself. But it's the person he is every day. Like, his energy is contagious for our team. He's an amazing leader. The job he's done in the classroom at Duke, just everything he does has taken our program to a new height this year.
Playing a year ahead of everyone else, Cooper, who had received the utmost trust from his head coach, John Shire, was showcasing his wide array of talent that would see him receive an insane comparison.
I think it's LeBron James, but without having to be like 260 pounds and like a freight train. Cooper Flagg is a supercomputer. Dan, he's a supercomputer. Everything you tell him, within 24 hours, he figured it out.
As Flagg, standing at roughly 6'10", not only possessed incredible athletic talents, but also elite skill at almost every aspect on the court. And while he wasn't apparently great at one specific thing, Cooper was truly good at everything. A skill set which resulted in the Duke forward not only averaging 19.2 points, 7.5 rebounds, 4.2 assists, but winning a war chest of awards, from National Player of the Year, the Wooden Award, ACC Player of the Year, the Lute Olson. You know what? He won a lot of awards. Okay, let's just move on. Yet, while his freshman campaign at Duke ended in tragic fashion due to an almost unthinkable comeback from the Houston Cougars during their Final Four battle at the March Madness tournament.
It was an incredible season. Incredible people, incredible relationships that I'm gonna have for the rest of my life. Didn't end the way we wanted it to, but still an incredible year.
Cooper Flagg was now ready to embark on the journey he had been preparing for his whole life.
With the first pick in the 2025 NBA Draft, the Dallas Mavericks select Cooper Flagg.
But was he really ready? Could a player who wasn't truly elite at one thing actually dominate in the NBA? And even if he could, would Flagg live up to the insane comparisons he had been receiving?
He is expected to be, sorry to be, I guess, a little crass with it, certainly the best white American player since Bird.
July 10th, 2025. Cooper, after being selected by the lowest odds team in the NBA draft lottery, the Dallas Mavericks, who was set to compete alongside NBA champion Anthony Davis and potentially Kyrie Irving if he returns from ACL injury, was excited to begin this journey at the Summer League against the Los Angeles Lakers. However, as the showcase progressed, Flagg was facing some serious issues because no matter what he tried, LA's defense was present, from sending his layup attempts flying to poking the ball loose or just making his life difficult. Flagg's failures sent shockwaves around the NBA as his 5 of 21 shooting night, which resulted in a subpar 10 points, saw many slap the bust label all over the Maine native and saw others questioning if he was really worth the #1 pick and if he could truly replace the Luka Doncic-sized hole that Nico Harrison left for Dallas.
Flagg driving baseline, got it in one.
Facing off against the San Antonio Spurs and their #2 pick, Dylan Harper, Cooper Flagg was desperate to show all his doubters that they were in fact wrong. Thanks to Coop dropping an incredible 31 points on an insanely efficient 8 of 13 shooting, it was made very clear the potential Flagg held, resulting in the Mavericks quickly shutting their first pick down. So could Flagg translate this success into his rookie NBA season, or would those who doubted him continue to be right? As the Dallas Mavericks were preparing for their 2025-2026 campaign, their head coach, Jason Kidd, would make a shocking move, one that he had also made during his tenure with the Milwaukee Bucks almost a decade ago, because faced with the absence of his actual point guard, Kyrie Irving, Kidd opted to have Flagg, although he was a forward, start as the Mavs PG, an interesting decision that he had actually done before as the Bucks coach with a certain MVP and NBA champion Giannis Antetokounmpo. But with Cooper facing off against the San Antonio Spurs once again, this time versus their main squad and their own #1 pick, Victor Wembanyama, and struggling, shooting just 31% from the field whilst only adding in a poor 10 points, doubt once again began to rise.
The Dallas Mavericks trying to outthink everybody, think they're the smartest dude in the world and realize it's just basketball. They need a point guard. First of all, Cooper Flagg, he only got 2 attempts. That tell me like, why has he only got 2 attempts? Because they got him trying to initiate the offense. Man, start D'Angelo Russell to Kyrie come back. These guys always want to act like they like, let's reinvent the wheel. Man, it's basketball.
However, given his own NBA Finals and championship experience, Coach Kidd would share with those who debated his decision exactly why this move was made.
Putting him in that position, understanding success is the last 6 minutes of the game, and it turns into the last 3 minutes, your best player is going to have the ball. And so just understanding the game a little bit different than others, I wanted to see him handle the ball sooner. And so sometimes we fail, sometimes there's success.
Yet, initially, over Flagg's first 15 battles as a rookie point guard, Cooper was faltering. But Jason Kidd stuck with him, fueling the Maine native's confidence whilst he found his feet in the league. However, thanks to Coop averaging just 15.5 points on an okay 45% shooting from the field, other 2025 draftees such as VJ Edgecombe and Dylan Harper were ranking far ahead of Flagg as the top rookie of this class, resulting in Coop sitting at just 4th. But on November 21st, 2025, that was all about to change. Facing off against the New Orleans Pelicans, Flagg, at just 18 years old, playing in what should be his freshman collegiate season, was beginning to show exactly why he was the #1 overall choice.
Now here's Coop on the drive and the spin and the score.
Because Coop's frame and body, combined with his elite footwork and athletic talent, essentially made him unstoppable.
And now Coop
resulting in Cooper scoring an early career high of 29 points, whilst also pulling down 7 boards and throwing 5 dimes. Yet, a dark cloud hung over Flagg. The New Orleans Pelicans, whilst their roster is talented, was one of the worst teams in the league, and doubt that Cooper could produce performances of this standard against legit NBA franchises still remained. A thought that as he struggled his way through their following battle against the Memphis Grizzlies, shooting just 4 of 15 from the field and producing a poor 12 points, faltered once again after that against the Miami Heat, only making 5 of his 14 attempts, and struggled scoring-wise again versus the Los Angeles Lakers that only grew. However, there was a diamond in the rough that Flagg had shown during his first battle with the league's most famous franchise. Because Cooper, while he had only produced 13 points, highlighted something else that made his Duke team so elite during his single season with the Blue Devils. With Flagg throwing 11 assists, he had not only become the youngest player to ever record 10 or more dimes in the NBA, but he proved that with enough talent that this season's first pick could be an elite connector, akin to a Magic Johnson or LeBron James as his NBA career progressed. Yet, without any real scoring talent, drawing in defenses to find teammates would be near impossible for Cooper, and with other rookies outperforming the teenager, the bus noise was only growing louder and louder. So, would Flagg be able to silence the uproar, or would all these haters be proved right? November 29th. 2025. Locking horns with Los Angeles' other NBA franchise, the Clippers, Cooper began to showcase a very unique talent that not many other right-handed players possess.
I don't understand. This guy now has a finishing move where he goes left, full speed, and does this craning lefty layup off the glass that he makes, which, by the way, it took 5 years for Jason Tatum to even have that shot, and he misses it like half the time.
Because, for some reason, Flagg has this elite ability to use his left hand, both for finishing in and around the basket, but also when handling and dishing to his Dallas teammates. Yet, as usual, it was what he was doing in the points column, which was drawing eyes from around the league.
No wasted motion when he gets those spots.
Oh, wow! No wasted motion there! Elevating and detonating Cooper Flagg. Happened. Turned his right ankle, and we found out late in the first quarter he was officially ruled out for the game. Another move made by Cooper inside.
With Cooper Flagg eclipsing his former career high thanks to a 60% shooting night which produced 35 points, and then following this up against one of the top teams in the Western Conference, the Denver Nuggets, by dropping 24 points on an efficient shooting night, the bus noise was slowly quieting. However, those who didn't believe in Flagg's talent still made a great point, because at this stage in the season, the Mavericks' record stood at 7-15, well below where Dallas hoped they would be heading into this season. Therefore, Cooper, still just at 18 years old, continued to put his best foot forward as he attempted to steer the Mavs ship back in the winning direction, doing things such as highlighting how much potential he had as a mid-range scorer against the Heat,
Cross-court pass to Flagg, goes behind the back, cutting himself free.
Adding in 22 points on an insane 70% from the field, and then over the next 3, averaging a decent 18 points and 4.3 assists, resulting in Dallas going on a mini 5-1 run. But the positive news didn't end there, with the hopeful return of one-time champion point guard Kyrie Irving, which would likely shift Flagg back to his more natural role as a forward, combined with the other talent on their roster, Anthony Davis, 4-time title winner Klay Thompson, and other pieces who were crucial to their 2024 finals run. Dallas's 2025-2026 campaign was seemingly going to be ending on a high, but it's what happened against the Utah Jazz which would truly shock the NBA world.
With it, Coop. And he puts it up with the left, and it's in there!
Facing off against the Jazz franchise for the first time in his short career, Cooper was truly taking his game to a whole nother level.
It's one of those clips you're going to show at halftime. You want to just rinse and repeat with the ball moving on that one.
Oh, right back at you! Coop hits a 3!
In fact, not only would Flagg eclipse his career high yet again in this young season.
Again, the next basket for Coop will give him a career high, and he's got it! 36 for Cooper Flagg and counting.
But as a result of his high basketball IQ,
4.5,
Misses the second. They crash the boards.
His Dallas Mavericks would force this battle into overtime. However, despite the #1 pick's 42-point game, the youngest 40-piece in NBA history, it was ultimately their rival once again leaving victorious. Yet, it was after this disappointing failure in which the true potential Cooper held within him was on full display.
It's tough though. I mean, I want to look at it, wins and losses. Obviously, we didn't win, so it's tough for me to, want to be happy or any of that. But obviously, it's, it's success, and we're going to try and keep getting better from here.
So, could Dallas actually turn their season around and start to record victories? Or was this going to be a rough learning curve for the Maine native? Because despite dominating in their next battle against the Detroit Pistons, in which Flagg again highlighted how elite his athletic talent was and the clutch gene he was beginning to develop thanks to the trust given to him from Coach Kidd, the Mavericks just continued to struggle, as over Dallas's following 5 matchups, their lone victory came at the hands of Cooper Flagg, pouring in 33 points on 67% shooting against the Denver Nuggets, proving just how reliant this injury-ridden Mavericks side was on their now 19-year-old point forward, something that as Flagg began to struggle, much like his teammates with injuries, only became clearer. As, thanks to Cooper not competing at the highest level possible due to ankle pain, his efficiency began to fall, and combined with the Mavericks' injury woes, Dallas would only win 7 of their next 16 battles, bringing their total record to just 19-28 after yet another loss to the Minnesota Timberwolves. Therefore, knowing full well how desperate he was to return to the winning ways he had experienced all throughout high school and college, Cooper Flagg was ready to shock the world against his former college roommate and 2025 Charlotte Hornets draft pick Kon Knueppel. January 29th, 2026.
Play. Here comes Cooper, and down it goes!
Battling for the first time on the highest stage of the game.
Any game against any of my former teammates, I think it would be really cool and surreal to be on this setting and in this environment and be able to play against them.
Both Kon and Coop were exchanging bucket after bucket.
On as Coop tries to answer Kon, and he does!
Resulting in Flagg doing something incredibly special.
The only player I had ever seen who was ready for the NBA right out of high school has been LeBron James. Until now. LeBron came in day one, he played well from day one. But to see a teenager play this well is incredible, man. Plain and simple.
Was his high that tied the Mavericks rookie record, also scored by Mark Aguirre, and now it's 40 for Cooper.
A good team.
All right, ball into Cooper with 46 points. A 3 would tie it. That's what he takes. Are you kidding me?
However, with Cooper's former teammate saving the hopes of his Hornets and Flagg ultimately failing to place his franchise ahead, it was unfortunately the Dallas Mavericks racking up yet another loss. But there was one positive. Cooper Flagg had just become the highest scoring teenager in the history of the NBA. However, once again post-game, Flagg was only locked into one thing.
Again, he's not about numbers, he's about wins and losses. That's who he is. He competes to win. The people who take stats, he's not worried about. And so for a young man who thinks that way, he's going to be a champion sooner than later.
So, over the next 3 games, the Maine native would go on one of the craziest runs a 19-year-old has ever made in the history of the league.
Coach, you get a lot of national criticism for playing Flagg at point guard. Over the last 2 games,
I don't give a fuck about the criticism. Criticism, that's your opinion. You guys write that bullshit. That's not that. I've done this. I played this game. I played it at a very high level, and I know what the I'm doing. But I don't give a what you guys write, because you guys have never played the game. And so I've built players, so I know what the I'm doing.
Going out and averaging 37.8 points, 9.3 rebounds, 4.3 assists on 56% shooting from the field, and 44% from 3 over the next 3 battles against the Houston Rockets, Boston Celtics, and San Antonio Spurs. All 3 franchises with serious championship rosters and intentions. Yet, with the Dallas Mavericks losing every single one of these games, it became clear to their franchise some shocking decisions had to be made.
We're going to start this show with breaking news from Shams Charania. AD is on the move again. Shams, what can you tell us?
Hannah, this is a trade deadline week stunner. Anthony Davis, the 10-time NBA All-Star, has been traded to the Washington Wizards.
So, with Dallas moving on from the player they so coveted during their 2024-2025 campaign in their trade for Luka, two things were made blatantly clear. Firstly, the Mavericks were now focused on one thing and one thing only: tanking. And the man chosen to drive this tank? Cooper Flagg. So, given Dallas's new goal, when Flagg suffered a foot injury in their loss versus the Phoenix Suns, his squad had Cooper ensure that he was fully rested, if you get what I mean, before ultimately returning 8 games later against the Orlando Magic. But once Cooper did step back onto an NBA floor, something just wasn't right. As over their next 5 games, while Dallas was successful in losing, Flagg had seemingly been teleported right back to the start of the season, potentially facing too much responsibility too soon. Because due to the Mavs' new focus of a high 2026 draft choice, Kyrie Irving, their lone remaining superstar, was shut down for the remainder of this campaign, leaving the complete ownership of any Dallas success in the hands of a teenager. Yet, Coop's poor 34% from the field, 25% from 3, and 16.3 point averages saw them lose 4 of their 5 battles upon return, and many began to resurface the same questions they held to begin the season. Was Cooper Flagg truly a generational talent that could carry a franchise from the depths of the NBA to championship success? March 13th, 2026.
Here's a drop. Elevating and detonating.
Battling against the Cleveland Cavaliers in a home and away back-to-back, Flagg was desperate to re-find those same legs he once held before his foot and ankle struggles, and continued to prove to not only Dallas, but the whole league, that he was in fact ready to carry his squad, much like those players he had been compared to had in the past.
My athleticism has kind of been lacking a little bit since I got hurt and kind of came back. So I finally felt like I was getting my pod back a little bit tonight.
But once again, despite a solid night from Coop, 25 points, 5 assists, and 50% from the field, it was the Mavs who left their now 45th game a loser, something that their number 1 pick just wasn't okay with. As during their following away game against Cleveland, Cooper set out to re-correct their course back in the winning direction.
Here's Cooper with a chase down block against Strus.
Coming out and quite literally doing anything and everything to help his squad be the one in the win column.
And Cooper with the block. Let's go. Help defense from Cooper. And he blocked the shot. He secured the rebound. He pushes in transition. And he drops it down to Ryan Nembhard.
Thanks to Flagg becoming the second youngest player, second only to LeBron James, to record a 25-plus point, 10-plus assist, and 5-plus rebound game, it was finally his franchise winning, ironically, their 23rd game of the season. However, after struggling scoring-wise over his next 3 battles, shooting just 42% from the field, and failing to knock down a single 3, even with Cooper averaging 7 dimes and 7.7 boards, the Mavs' loss total had ballooned to a horrific 48. So, desperate to return to the recent form he had shown against the Cavaliers, as Flagg stepped foot onto the American Airlines Center court to face off against the Golden State Warriors, Cooper had 1 goal and 1 goal only.
Out to Flagg, baseline drive, Flagg with the 2-hand throwdown. We have a 3-point ball game. Flagg, we have a 6-point ball game.
But tragically, even with Coop scoring an insane 32 points on 63% from the field and 50% from 3 after his failed dime to Najee Marshall, which would have propelled his Dallas side into the win column, and the eventual domination the Warriors showed throughout overtime, the ex-Blue Devil had lost yet another game in the NBA. A devastating fact that was taking a real toll on the Maine native.
I mean, obviously it's been tough. Like you said, through high school, college. I mean, I only lost 4 games last year, so there's been times of the season where it's been, really mentally taxing on me. Just not having the success that I would have hoped for, and obviously we've had a lot of injuries and a lot of, unfortunate things happen throughout the year. But it's obviously not been ideal, and I mean, I've had growth along the way, and I've had to get better and learn, on the fly. But Yeah, definitely not the start I would have looked for, but
Yet, given the nature of the league, Cooper would be given yet another opportunity to finally return to the side of the game he was so used to just 2 days later. And what Flagg was about to do against the Denver Nuggets was truly shocking. March 25th, 2026.
He finds Cooper, and Cooper driving with authority and finishing in the same fashion.
Flagg driven to continue his domination and with the full backing of his franchise to be the guy.
coming in, I wasn't expecting, kind of to be thrown in the fire as much. Obviously, I was looking at, AD, Kai, Clay, and obviously with, some of the injuries and stuff, it just didn't work out that way, and I was kind of just thrown out there, a little bit more than I would have expected and had a little bit more responsibility. But I think overall it's just something to develop. Like you said, you mentioned the point guard thing. Like, Coach K just giving me that confidence to go out and be a creator and learn the game in a lot of different ways.
Coop was unstoppable.
Bullet pass inside, Cooper a block.
However, once again, even with Flagg recording his 10th game with 25 or more points, 5 or more assists, and 5 or more rebounds, done without a single turnover, more than anybody in the whole NBA, it was the Dallas Mavericks hitting home losers again. But throughout their following battle against the Portland Trail Blazers, thanks to the Mavs' top choice showcasing his elite mid-range package, which helped to keep his points per game average amongst Hall of Famers.
Averaging 20 plus points as a teenager, you, Luka, Durant, LeBron, and Carmelo.
Dallas had finally managed to win something. Yet, despite Coop's name being surrounded by legends, many fans and even analysts who actually vote for Rookie of the Year are choosing to side with Flagg's former roommate, Kon Knueppel, as the winner. But why? Well, Kon, who was chosen 4th overall by the Charlotte Hornets, arrived into a situation which perfectly matched his skill set, because Knueppel, who has already broken multiple records from beyond the arc, fits perfectly as a shooter alongside the Hornets' other ball-dominant players in LaMelo Ball and Brandon Miller, which, thanks to the improved health of their roster and the play of Kon, has resulted in Charlotte finally returning to the playoffs for the first time since 2016. However, Cooper's teammate Ryan Nembhard would plead his running mate's Rookie of the Year case, sharing that despite Flagg never training to be a point guard, he is still impressively in second amongst first-year NBA players for assists per night, second only to Ryan himself. But that's not the only thought he shared, because Nembhard would highlight the fact that unlike Knueppel, Flagg has quite literally been thrown into the deep end as an NBA franchise's #1 option as a literal teenager. And what happened on April 3rd, 2026 perfectly summarized exactly what Nembhard is trying to say. Because whilst battling at home against the Orlando Magic, Flagg would once again place his name right next to one of the greatest players to ever grace the hardwood.
Well, no teenager has ever scored 50 points in an NBA game. There's a chance for it right here, right now. It's happened.
As not only would Flagg end this loss recording 51 points, something no teenager has ever done in the history of the league, but he became the only player since Michael Jordan himself to record multiple 45-plus point games during their initial season in the league. So, what do you think? Who do you believe is the 2026 Rookie of the Year? And even if you're watching this after the winner is crowned, still let me know if you think they made the correct decision. By the way, you know how Cooper's rookie season is being compared to that of LeBron James? Have you ever wondered how LeBron's first season in the NBA all the way back in 2003 actually went? Well, if you would love to find out more about the 4-time champion's first season in the league, the challenges he faced, and why Bron won Rookie of the Year over Carmelo Anthony in a shockingly similar race to that of Flagg and Knueppel, click the video on your screen right now.